that are good for
Avocado.
both.
That sometimes works.
All right, we're gonna go.
All right, good evening. We're going to call this special meeting of the City Plan Commission to order. Today is Tuesday, April 23rd. It's 4:47 p.m. We will do a quick roll call. Will Sherry?
Ready? I'm only here for that petition. When
You're here for item number 1. Yeah.
But I don't need.
Nope.
Charlotte, Chip.
Chardon Manager, card DPD staff.
Robert Azar, staff.
Sharon Gardner, legal counsel.
And I'm Michael Gazdacko, Chair. We will start, we'll go into a director's report. There are no minutes to approve because we had our regular meeting last week.
Right. The only thing I want to say on the director's report is that you're seeing the next installment of comprehensive plan chapters today. We still have a few more. We were hoping that we would have all of it to you today, but we just couldn't get it over the finish line. So look for more to come. We'll have to talk about what May is looking like because we do have a lot of items in the queue. We just got a couple of new land development projects in the door today. So we'll be sending out some further correspondence about your meeting in May. Other than that, you'll hear very shortly the comprehensive planning chapters from other planning staff. But first, we just need to hopefully get through item number 1 quickly, which we continued today. And we had to make sure that we had this particular composition of the City Plan Commission in order to continue to move on this.
Okay, since we do have the correct composition, we have all of the original members who were here when we first heard this application back in, what was it? November of 2023. We've now continued it from the March meeting to last week. We continued it last week to today. So now we will call the first item on the agenda, which is a minor subdivision with unified development review. Public hearing for case number 23-054 UDR. It's about an application for 53 Pomona Avenue, and I believe Attorney Garrett, he is here, and the applicant is here.
Yes, and commissioners, you'll recall that this is a minor subdivision. This lot is slightly smaller than 10,000 square feet. That's why they were asking for zoning relief to subdivide it from 1 lot into 2 lots. It's actually within that 15% that makes it eligible for administrative modification. They had applied for that. It was noticed as such. There was an objector, and that's why it came to you for zoning relief. Our recommendation was to approve this zoning relief. However, there was it became known that there was a significant tree on the vacant portion of the lot, and there was a lot of discussion about that at the meeting in November. We were between city foresters. We now have a new city forester, and he has issued an opinion about this tree, and I'm going to just display this on the screen. What it says here is that he has approved the removal of the significant oak, finding that it would not be that its existence prevents the lot from being developed. And then he has conditions attached to his approval that 3 oak trees, that other oak trees have to be preserved, and that there be a tree protection zone around these oaks during construction, no regrading of the soil, that no roots from those oaks measuring more than 2 inches in diameter shall be severed, and that 2,000 square feet of canopy coverage will be planted additionally on the property after building construction, either on site or through street trees, and a couple other notes about planting. So that is now in hand. That was what you were asking for. Some additional information with respect to whether the site can be developed with the tree. I think the forester definitively said that in his professional opinion it can't. So that this letter is in hand, and I think right now we can just pick up where we left off. You were in the process of deliberating, and that's when Mr. Gary asked for a continuance. So, Mr. Gary, you may have more details on this.
Should we well, I think maybe we'll let Attorney Garrett summarize anything that's come to light since then, and then I think since there is new information, if we want to open to public comment one more time, just to out of an abundance of caution, before we get deliberations again. So that's how I think we should probably proceed.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, John Garrett, on behalf of the applicant, thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. Azar had summarized everything very well. We went through an extensive process with respect to the forester, actually 3 foresters, and received that opinion, after we really made an effort to see if the house would be located in a different location to preserve the tree. It could not, be done, so he did provide that letter to us. Just from a matter of summary, we had an expert testify with respect to the standards for the dimensional variance, which is sought in this case, that testimony was part of the record, and transcripts have been provided. So I'd like to just make sure that that testimony is incorporated into the record here. If it is, it's not going to continue from date to date as required by law. Be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman, but it's been kind of a long call. This is a relatively minor modification of the lot size in order to accomplish a lot development. As you may know, under new regulations, the substandard lots of record featured along with the uses permitted do not require a variance. This is a new lot, it's not under that standard, but the theory is more or less the same, and encouraging new housing on lots that are generally smaller but consistent with the area. I suggest to you that this meets that requirement, and it's entirely appropriate for the lot size variance as well as the coverage.
Thank you, Attorney Gary. Commissioners, do you have anything for the applicant? Again, this is a continuing matter, so everything that was submitted, all the testimony that's on record is a part of this case still. This case hasn't been closed. The application's been open until today, when we're back together with this new finding submitted by the city forester, the new city forester. So anything for the applicant before I open it up to public comment? Okay, let's, there's nothing else we need for staff report. We already heard the planning department's recommendation, so this is a public hearing. We'll open up the public comment portion of this agenda item. Again, it's case number 25-054 UDR. It's 53 Pomona Avenue. If there's anyone here from the public who wishes to speak on this matter, please raise your hand and come forward. And if you're joining us from home, please raise your virtual hand in the bottom middle section of your screen, or press *9 if you're calling in.
Nobody online.
Seeing no one in the room with us today, we will close the public comment portion of this agenda item this time. All right, commissioners, we've heard the testimony on this, and our biggest sticking point was the fact that the city forester, who's on his last day, sent a letter to the applicant saying that they could not proceed, concerned us. Now we have a different opinion. The city forester has approved the demolition of this tree, whether it goes forward or so I think that finishes up our concerns here for this matter. So we'd be looking for 2 votes, because we need to vote on the zoning matter, the dimensional variance, and we need to vote on the minor subdivision. So we start with the zoning matter.
Mr. Chair, you could just make sure you go through the criteria for the zoning variance. Please,
Did the applicant testify to that, or we have
I
to
need to
confirm
have
it?
some discussion and conversation on it from the city plan commission.
Trying to remember what we had on record from the last time, but we didn't get that far into the deliberation, I don't think. All right, so let's go through the,
What I think breaks down.
yeah, I'm working on, yeah, we'll work through it from there. Thank you, Attorney Gary. So we're looking for dimensional relief. It's about 10% of the 5,000 square foot, it's probably 5% overall. We need to, the applicant conveyed certain findings, and we just have to agree with those findings, make our own, that the dimensional variance meets the standards. So the first one is that the hardship from which the applicant seeks relief is due to the unique characteristics of the subject land and not to the general characteristics of the surrounding area. Obviously, this lot is 9,682 square feet, 9,682 square feet, so then 300 change being a 10,000 square foot lot. So I would say that is it would have been handled administratively if not for the objection. That's why it's in front of us today. The hardship is not the result from any prior action of the applicant. The applicant did not create the lot less than 10,000 square feet. Obviously, it's not anything that the applicant did. It's to the unique character of the lot. The granting of the variance will not alter the general characteristics of the surrounding area, or impair the intent or purpose of the ordinance or the comprehensive plan. We heard even just today from Attorney Gary, the comprehensive plan and the ordinance allow for this to be handled administratively, if not for the objector next door. And the comprehensive plan specifically is focused on creation of new housing units. So that's definitely that. And it's also more in-depth in the staff report. And then as part of the United Development Review, it requires that evidence be entered into the record that shows that granting the dimensional variance and hardship that will be suffered by the owner of the subject property if the dimensional variance is not granted will amount to more than a mere inconvenience. And that was submitted. Obviously, he'll only be able to build one house instead of, keep the one house or instead of two. Subdivide the lots, we wouldn't be able to have more housing put on lot. So with that, the staff report recommends that we approve the relief from the minimum lot size. And based on our findings that we heard today, the discussion we just had, I believe to be in effect. So anyone would like to make a motion to approve the dimensional variance based on the findings from the applicant, noted in the staff report and our discussion.
Yeah, just to make a motion to approve the dimensional relief there.
Based on all of that. And we have a second?
I'll second.
Perfect. Let's go around and do a voice vote. Will?
Aye.
Nicole?
Aye.
Charlotte?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Now we'll vote on the minor subdivision, or make a motion if we were to on the minor subdivision, and that could just be that the CPC should have approved the preliminary plan pursuant to the dimensional relief being granted. Obviously, we just did that. And that I would say that we alter it to the final plan should be delegated to DPD staff. But before that, it should say that we follow the recommendations of the city forester in the letter provided by the city forester. So I think someone could say so moved to that as well.
So,
We have a second?
Second.
All right, go around and do a voice vote. Will?
Aye.
Nicole?
aye.
Charlotte? And I vote aye. Best of luck. And with that, we will move into the reason most of you are here tonight, which is agenda item number 2. Our favorite subject in the year of 2024, which is the comprehensive plan update. And we have some new chapters rolling out today. I'm very excited to speak about those. And Tim is coming up. You want to?
Yeah, I'll just sort of tee this off. So the plan for tonight is that Tim is going to give us a general overview to sort of set the stage, explain, where we are and what's been done to date. And then for each of the 4 chapters, we're going to have a different member of the planning staff present on this. And then once we do the presentation on all the chapters, we can take public comment.
That sounds great. Tim, whenever you're ready, take it away. The floor is yours.
Make sure you just speak close to the mic.
Yeah, we want everyone at home because we do have quite a few people on the interwebs listening in.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us here again today. So as Bob mentioned, we are excited to share with you next step in this comprehensive plan update process. I'm just going to place the chapters that we're talking about today in context and kind of remind us of what informs this work that our department's doing, our community engagement process, and the land use, draft land use chapter that we brought to you at the last meeting. And then I'll hand it off to our team here today. So as commission members are aware, but members of the public might be becoming more aware. So the comprehensive plan, as our 10-year guiding plan for development in the city, touches on a lot of different topic areas. We hear a lot about the land use element of the plan because of its binding nature to our zoning ordinance, but there are several other topics that are included in this plan. This is a list of what we are planning on including in the first draft here. So land use, chapter on the built environment, on sustainability, on people and public spaces, on economic development, housing, mobility, arts and culture, and then community services and facilities. So we gave an introductory presentation on land use at last month's meeting. If anyone's interested in finding those presentations or that material, our website is plan.providenceri.gov. And today we're gonna cover these 4 chapters. So just briefly, this has been a process that's been going on for over a year now. So we have led a pretty thorough and iterative community engagement process that started in 2022 with listening sessions to get a sense of the most important issues to residents in our city. We then transitioned into really the bulk of that process where we were visioning with neighbors, thinking about what we want the city to be in 20 years, and brainstorming policy ideas and responses to some of our key challenges. We included a variety of engagement formats in that process thus far. So everything from community workshops that we co-hosted with our city council members, to topic-specific conversations in partnership with neighborhood nonprofits, community organizations. We tabled at block parties and community events to get people who maybe wouldn't necessarily come out to their local ward meeting or neighborhood association meeting, but in total now we're well over 80 different forms of community engagement events, and we're transitioning into this more formal stage of our review process. We're now kind of framing it as it's been a long period of community feed in, and now we're transitioning to feedback and looking for feedback on whether you think these policy ideas really respond to the challenges and the urgency that we heard from community members, and where you think there are opportunities for improvement. So I'll just note before we dive in that this feedback process is not only here at the City Plan Commission. We're kicking off a series of library kind of office hour, drop-in, open house style events where we're going to have members of our staff at 5 different libraries around the city, starting next Monday night at Rochambeau Library. We try to position these pretty spread out across the city. So we'll be there from 4 to 7:30 on those weekday evenings, and then we'll be at the downtown Providence Public Library on a Saturday from 10 to 2 p.m. So laying out these materials, giving you a chance to really engage with them in depth, to chat with the planning staff, with neighbors, and share some feedback. And there'll be Spanish language access and then translation at all of these events. And just briefly, last month, we introduced the draft land use chapter, which included 2 key elements that we've discussed. And I think it really, this being kind of a key element of the plan, informs some of the changes that we have here today. We heard from community loud and clear that the housing crisis was issue number 1. We heard that people are very concerned about climate, not only our emissions, but also our resilience to extreme weather events. We heard about wanting to align growth with transportation and mobility options. And we heard about a lot of other topics, but we unveiled first a growth strategy that is kind of a conceptual map that tries to inform the goals and strategies of this plan, to think about, okay, where should we encourage development, of what scale, how do we align that with amenities around our city? So big takeaway there being that we want to align larger scale development and higher density housing with best practices. So thinking about transportation options, destinations, as well as the existing built environment. And then we've taken that and moved into the detail of our future land use map. So this is the first draft that we've unveiled. that, you know, you can think of it as translating towards continuing mixed use growth downtown in our kind of business mixed use areas and on commercial corridors. But also, you know, big change here in this plan is looking at our residential areas, thinking about how we create more flexibility for housing in all of our residential areas. So in our low density areas, creating some flexibility through tools like ADUs. In our medium density areas, which this is, we're proposing a kind of consolidation, but really being honest about what exists there today and making it easier to build what exists there today. A lot of 2 and 3 family homes, kind of allowing that incremental next step of gentle density in these neighborhoods, and then thinking about where high density is appropriate. And then just in our business and industrial areas, where what we've proposed here is kind of a redefining of these areas that also prioritizes cleaner, more sustainable, resilient forms of industry. So that's in the context today that informs as we're thinking about our parks, as we're thinking about design, as we think about economic development. We're also having this in mind, that this is a plan that is encouraging growth, especially in housing, is preparing for a growing city, and that informs some of our policy areas. So we'll start with Mr. Ise and the built environment chapter, and I think we also have Jason Martin calling in. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Great.
I'll kind of tee this up as Jason is coming online and as Chris is taking his place. So with respect to the built environment, there's a lot of similarity actually to the language in the 2014 comprehensive plan. Fundamentally, this is the goal. We have one goal for each of our chapters: promote, and protect, preserve, and promote a high quality built environment is the goal here. And then we have a series of objectives. If you want to just move on to the next slide there, Tim. So these are those objectives. We talk a lot about design, sort of design from the perspective of the public realm, but also the buildings that get built on private property. We talk an awful lot about preservation, and we talk about the tools that we have available to us to promote high quality urban design. Specifically, what we'd like to talk about, dig into a little bit today is the tools that we are currently using. Some of them we've been developing since this latest round of zoning changes that we made. As you know, a lot of projects get reviewed administratively that formerly would have come to this board, specifically minor land development projects. And we've been working to try to develop a process where there's a conversation about design, there's a dialogue with the developers about design, and we bring our design professionals to the table for these discussions. So Jason's online. I think we'll start with Chris. And what I'd like to pose is Chris has for a very long time been overseeing design review in downtown. He staffs the downtown design review committee, the Capital Center Commission. He's been a liaison with the I-195 Commission, and we've long had processes that speak to administrative reviews and reviews by the board, by the boards. He also now has taken on administrative development plan review. These are projects that are smaller than land development projects, but in our opinion, still worthy of review. And that review fundamentally is a zoning check. The zoning ordinance has some design regulations in it. But again, I think what I'd like Chris to talk to is the sort of method that he employs when he's dealing with developers. And we've now started employing this for minor land development projects as well. So Chris, just introduce yourself to those who don't know you, and just make sure you speak very close to the mic.
Chris Reese, planning department, principal planner. So, as Bob said, the things that I handle is the downtown design review committee. We have zoning regulations, design regulations in our zoning ordinance that address new construction in downtown, and also design regulations for existing buildings in downtown. So we use those two regulations and design standards to review new construction or alterations to existing buildings. So those design standards were developed early on in '90, but we over the years have improved them and made them more easier for developers to use, and it gives more leeway for design for new construction. For existing buildings, we use the Secretary of Interior standards for historic rehabilitation for historic structures in downtown, any alterations. So those regulations are in our ordinance, and we constantly are looking at them to see if they work. And then as far as also for regulations in development plan review, we've also have design regulations for all different types of housing or buildings in zoning ordinance. So those are the tools that we use to regulate design.
Yeah, so these design regulations, they're not super prescriptive. A lot of times we speak about, for example, a certain percentage of a facade has to have transparency, or certain materials are not allowed above the first floor, non-durable materials and so forth. But we found that people can interpret these regulations in a multitude of ways, and the result may be compliant, but is not attractive, not high quality urban design. So Chris, how do you engage with developers when it comes to things that you see where, you know, maybe they follow the rules, but you think that something could be better?
Yeah, I mean, when an architect comes with a set of plans, I mean, basically it's that their design. So we have to make sure that, number one, that they follow all of the regulations, but there's also a little bit of, could be subjective in some ways. There are things that buildings need. You know, when we say we want good, high quality urban design architecture, I think it's up to the staff to sort of lead that developer or architect in the right direction. It's gonna be subjective, but Bob and I talk about this all the time about how we have a good relationship with a lot of people, and we can get a good product out of it if we sort of negotiate design.
It's a bit of a give and take. You know, the thing about our regulations is that they're supposed to be objective. It's supposed to be clear what you can do and what you can't do. We're not supposed to be sort of engaging in a game of, you know, guess what we're thinking and keep coming back. So, and also I think to Chris's point, it's not our intention if a designer has a particular point of view and wants to execute in a particular way. It's not our intention to say, we don't want you to build a building that looks anything like this. It's more, these are some things that we think you can do. You know, often it has to do with proportions, size of things, you know, trim elements, you know, a lot of details, because the details can really, you know, make something fair to, you know, change something that's fair to something that's good or even great. And you know, we're cognizant of the fact that we have time frames we have to review things within. And, you know, I think we do an excellent job of this. Like Chris said, we're also looking at the regulations to see what works and what doesn't work. I think coming out of this comprehensive plan, for example, we may have to say that unpainted, pressure-treated lumber on a front porch is not allowed, for example. You don't think you have to say that, but I think you have to say that.
Well, I think also we come across things that we don't think of, you know, we'll see a project and, or we'll follow the regulations and thinking that everything's covered, but then you'll get like a pressure treated front porch, like in a development big project. Or, we talk about things changing things that all the time, and have the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, and for those who might not know what we're talking about, pressure treated lumber is it's treated with chemicals so it doesn't rot, and often developers don't paint them. They're sort of designed to sort of weather. They can be painted, but they don't have to be.
Well, lately we've been asking.
We don't want to allow that.
It's pretty ugly.
Well, we've asked.
It's kind of greenish, and it's generally a low quality grade lumber that doesn't look good if it's not painted.
I recently asked one person if they could, encase the pressure treated wood with, trim or like some sort of, they can be painted. So, and they usually, we tell them, look, you're gonna get a better look out of this, and it's gonna fit in better with the streetscape, you know, older houses on the street. So it's a case by case basis, but we're constantly reviewing it.
Yeah, and you know, it takes time, but we do try to work directly with the developers when they bring these projects in, and you know, we can't do it for every new house, but you know, in some cases we may have to, depending on you know, what people are proposing. We also work very closely with the zoning official who follows a similar process. I want to just be cognizant of time, so I want to move on to Jason, who's online, who can tell us a little bit about the regulations and the process for historic districts. Really, I don't think there are many changes proposed there are no changes proposed to the process, but there might be some room for improvement in the regulations, and then always there's the opportunity perhaps to add new properties to historic districts. So Jason, welcome. Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Jason Martin, Preservation Planner. So as Bob said, the Preservation Planning section hasn't changed dramatically in its kind of purpose. What we look at is kind of the evolution of building materials and their appropriateness within the districts. Situations like that become kind of key to moving projects through the commission that, you know, that everyone can be satisfied with. The commission's had some progress lately. We've been seeing a lot of windows based on window proposals based on the lead laws, and we've been kind of moving to newer and different types of windows that people that are kind of more economical than the more traditional windows we've been approving. And from a design point of view, they're appropriate from our standard. So that's been something that's progressing with the board as well. As Bob said, during this process of the comp plan, a lot of it is evaluating what we have existing. Just briefly, we have 8 historic districts. Most of those are neighborhood districts that are common to people, the Armory, Broadway, College Hill, etc. We also have something called the Providence Landmarks District, was originally what we called the Industrial and Commercial Buildings District. In 2014, during the last time we did this, we created the Providence Landmarks District and created a residential component, added a bunch of buildings. There'll be some changes there. Usually during this process, we look at buildings, primarily buildings that are, for instance, in 2014, we added most of the non-locally designated, individually listed national registered properties in the city to that district. In this phase, we're looking at other buildings possibly for consideration, maybe ecclesiastical buildings. There's always some industrial buildings we find that we miss that maybe now should be have some regulatory view on them. And the other thing we've been talking about lately is trying to look at various ways to have incentives within the districts as well. So there used to be, some may remember in the audience, there used to be something called the state income tax credit program for historic properties. And if you spend a certain amount of money on a historic property in the state historic commission would review that and you would get a tax credit from the state for it. The program kind of went away and then came back. And what the state did is that they've allowed this program to be regulated by the municipality through their historic district commission. So they would act as the SHPO. So we're starting to investigate that. It gets a little technical where we have to change state law for it. We have to add in essence, add our name to the statute, the name of the city. But that's something we're investigating in this and could be helpful for owners going forward.
Great. Okay, thank you, Jason. So I think that kind of sums it up. Just for everybody, just a reminder, we're going to take public comment after we've heard from all the representatives for each of the sections. So I think we can move on to the next one now.
Actually, just before we jump into the next section, maybe we'll offer the commissioners just a quick point while we have you guys available, to be able to talk back and forth on these, because it's an iterative process. Jason, I completely agree with the historic tax credit needing to be revived, 100%. And Christopher, thank you for the work you're doing. Bob and I have been talking about you doing that with most of the development projects that have administrative review that come through now, because so many more projects are going to have administrative review, and I appreciate that. I think living with the regulations is just something that you have to do. You do your best at trying to find out everything that everyone is going to want to do, and we see this when we change policies in every aspect. So you know that there are going to be unintended consequences that come from whatever you do, and you never will catch everything. The only way to find out is, living with it and having things come about. But as long as we're continuing to evolve and make sure that those design standards are refined and more strategic, more objective, allowing us to clearly verbalize in text what we want from projects from a design standpoint, that would be amazing. And I know Charlotte's probably itching to help speak to those. So if you ever want to talk about that, Charlotte is here. She's ready to go because we see a lot of things where projects that come before us, and the only carrot we have is you guys want this relief, or you want this dimensional adjustment. We think this design could be improved this way. Whereas if the regulations were a little bit more tweaked, it might help us guide the project along as well. And it's kind of an iterative process with us as well. It's a give and take. Like, yeah, you guys, you want this, so we have the ability to, and we've incorporated that into the last changes to our plan review process, is that we do have design review authority. Which is going to help us going forward. We've always assumed we did, but we've codified that. As far as Jason, going back to you, there are a few things on preservation planning. Actually, really one big thing that I wanted to amend from the section, and it's probably best under BE4 preservation planning. Strategy E, which is currently reads, require institutions to identify historic buildings and plan for their future use. Evaluate institutional properties listed or eligible for the state or national register for solution into local historic districts. I want this to be a little bit more, have a little more teeth. These are institutions that get a lot from the city. We've run into issues where we've had conflict, where the city wants something and the institution wants something, but they're here for the public good in one way or another. And I think that this should be more of, instead of evaluate and consider, I think we should talk about incorporating more of these properties into historic landmark districts. There are many historic properties that institutions have that could be incorporated into individual landmark districts. Obviously, they wouldn't be included into an area necessarily. But I think we have to figure out how to do that, because they get a lot from the city, the institutions. We get a lot from them, obviously. So it's a mutually beneficial relationship. But I think that we've run into some issues with hospital. I think the Rhode Island Hospital project came before us about 8 years ago, right after the last comp plan was put into place, and the tug and pull we had there, and it wasn't a good outcome for the city and for that historic building. I think we need to have some teeth on here and how to make an objective to incorporate more of these institutions' buildings into landmark districts. So that was my big note on this one. I've passed it over to any of the other commissioners who want to talk about the built environment chapter before we move on to the next.
I think I just had one major comment, which is really just kind of to reinforce a lot of the notes being made around with maybe state historic tax credits or any efforts we can make to help people who are looking at rehabilitating buildings or, propping them up so that they're more resilient for decades to come, to be able to do that. I think a lot of the future land use map relies on fairly small time landlords, like people who own 2 or 3 units, taking on those properties and becoming stewards of those properties. And it's, if they bought them, they obviously think they have the means to be stewards of those properties. But I think anything we can do as a city or a state to make building reuse and having many lives in these buildings come to fruition would be great. So
Completely agree. Nicole, Will, anything else? Nicole, Will, anything else to add? Board move on. All right, wonderful. Thank you guys. Thank you for that. And let's move right on to is it sustainability next?
Were you gonna say anything initially?
I think I'm gonna let you take it, Dave.
Yeah, okay.
You're up.
I'm Dave Everett. I work for the planning department as well. And my focus over the past several years has been mostly waterfront board, stormwater, flooding, things that have to do with sustainability and the environment in general. So I think in this section, we have some new points of emphasis. You can read this first goal, or the goal, which I don't know if I need to read through it, but it speaks to most of what you would expect in a section like this in this day and age. With that said, the new emphasis, I think, is more on the being cleaner and greener, especially with respect to industrial practices. And not, obviously a lot of this has to do with what goes on in the port area. But we don't want, it's not confined to that. And that can have to do with both operations and uses, and transitioning and building on the growth of alternative energy, including wind, which is already well underway. Another point of emphasis is environmental justice and community benefits and local jobs. When you put on my reading glasses, so I can read my tiny notes. And limiting the impacts on the, most vulnerable and, underserved neighborhoods. And this, again, especially in the port area or adjacent to the port area. Not that all of the emphasis is there. And I think the third large point of emphasis, which also applies to the two preceding points, is, what I'll broadly lump together as resilience, stormwater, and flooding, especially riverine flooding, based on, recent trends, which I think everybody's aware of. There's a new emphasis on departmental coordination, investment on the part of the city, things like pavement reduction. And there are other aspects of this. I don't know how deeply we need to go into it right now. But you can see that there are a number of what are we calling these? Objectives, yes. It changes from time to time. So I've talked about climate protection, stormwater and flooding to some extent. You can see a lot of these things kind of overlap. Obviously, climate protection, air quality, and heat mitigation. Air quality is a big issue. It's something we don't always have immediate control over. But I think the objectives that are, or the goals and the objectives and the actions that we're promoting in this section address a transition that will improve air quality. And then we have things like nature in the city, which has to do with actually the habitat that exists. And so we're not just talking about what's to our benefit, but what's to the benefit of nature and people. Obviously, resource conservation, I think, kind of speaks for itself. Energy is a big issue. Sustainability in the built environment has to do with, some of the stuff that was just talked about, but in more specific to, the sustainability and resilience, the effects of climate change. And lastly, of course, brownfields, which, Providence has a lot of brownfields. I was recently asked for I think it was for a technical assistance out of another city department, and how many brownfields there were, and it's a hard number to get a handle on. So yeah, so it's so anyway, that is a continuing point of priority, and here we have also public awareness and involvement, which obviously we want people to understand what it means to be sustainable and resilient. And we've added a objective of its own that kind of speaks to all of the other ones. Frontline neighborhoods and environmental justice. In other words, it should run through the other objectives. So that we're mitigating disproportionate impacts on communities that are most affected, populations that are most affected, et cetera. And then lastly, we want to make sure that we're in coordination with the state, with regional objectives. I can tell you that through some of the ongoing efforts that are not necessarily city, specifically city efforts. I'm involved in something called the Port Community Working Group, which involves people from state, city, neighborhoods, and EPA addressing issues that affect port community issues in general. And I think we've made a lot of headway. It doesn't always make the headlines, but I think this whole section kind of speaks to that kind of approach. So I guess I'll leave it at that for now.
I don't know if this is a question for you guys.
Microphone.
I don't know if this is a question for you guys or Bob, but, and I might sound like a broken record on this, but one of the things I really want to get out of the comprehensive plan rewrites and process, et cetera, is I really want us to have incentives for development that is, whether it's carbon neutral or includes, clean energy is, right now, and I don't know if it's in the comp plan or what document it is, but there's a document where if someone has mixed use, it makes them eligible for a hybrid. It's like wherever those types of incentives are, I would love it if we could add. You could be eligible for a height variance or eligible for something that people come and ask for. If they're making their business carbon neutral, or if they're making the building carbon neutral, or if they're making, energy efficient, something there. It's a tool that I would love to add to our toolbox.
I think even to go one step further, and it's something I wrote down too, is incentivizing and prioritizing. Like under SRE4H, you have it there, but I think like we were talking about the historic tax credit. A lot of these smaller developers, smaller homeowners don't have the resources or the know-how to do what it takes, LEED certification or sustainable building materials, things like that, that could really, help tilt the scale. I think, putting some more emphasis on that somehow in here and in the way we review projects. I completely agree that can be, an incentive that we use for dimensional adjustments or things like that. I mean, we can definitely incorporate that into, the way we review projects as well. But I think the city needs to help us help the owners of these properties or the developers achieve this goal as well.
Yeah, I think that speaks to the need for coordination among the different elements of the comprehensive plan and among departments, et cetera.
Absolutely. And then my next point was kind of straddling the two, sustainability, resilience, and the environment, and people in public spaces, because you both speak to heat zones, you both speak to quality of air, removal of asphalt and pavement, and I think there's not enough emphasis put on trees and canopy coverage throughout neighborhoods and city streets. I go back to like when I ran for office in 2016, and I walked streets in that district I ran for like 5 times. And it's in the heat of summer, and you go from one street, like one part of the West End, and you go over to South Providence across Cranston Street, and there'd be like, you go from, it felt like it was like 80 degrees. You go across the street, it felt like it's 95 degrees, because it's just concrete and asphalt, and there are no trees in it. And the people that you go to their door, they're angrier than the people you go to, just because it's so hot and it's uncomfortable. And I think that could be prioritized a little bit more too, from a city aspect and a city rolling out, talking about environmental justice specifically. There are trees in certain parts of the neighborhoods, and then there are not trees in others. And I think we should be more equitable about that as well.
Yeah, and I can just say that, there are a lot of, we do speak to it to some extent, but in this section, but maybe not enough in other sections.
Yeah.
We did more in this section.
You do a decent job in here, but then people in public spaces, again, it talks about it a little bit, but it's just not enough emphasis.
Right, I was gonna say that there is an incredible amount of data compared to what there used to be. Because I used to notice it anecdotally all the time.
Right.
I lived in about 10 or 12 different neighborhoods, worked probably in 3 more.
Yep.
Yeah, not only is the data out there, but there are a lot of efforts underway, but it's a question of like really publicizing it. And also, we need to talk about tree care and maintenance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All of it.
Yeah, I was gonna, just to piggyback on the comments about incentivizing, low energy building. I think, one of the standards we should be looking at, maybe more so than LEED, is passive house. I think there are cities and towns that have used that standard as, sort of a benchmark for thinking about incentivizing extra height or extra density, or, no need to have parking, or, whatever it might be. But, I think that's a really, valuable standard to look at. And then, I also just want to bring up the point about transit and specifically how we think about space for bikes in our built environment and also in our urban design. Like post-pandemic, bike lane has been slowly getting peeled away, and it feels like a huge part of this, especially here where, I would argue a lot of people choose to bike over taking public transit, and it's super effective. So,
Because like you said, there's so many interlapping chapters, like we're gonna get to mobility and transit the next time we talk about this, but it is very much a part of sustainability, resilience. And it's a part of probably economic development and people in public spaces and the built environment. So there's
I
a
think that's
lot of
also the problem.
overlap.
It lives in multiple places.
Right.
It can get lost, being not at the forefront of either any single chapter. So just wanted to.
I think it probably will be in the mobility. We haven't seen the final draft of that yet, but it's definitely alive there. I'm quite certain of that.
That's right.
Nicole, Will, anything else on this before we move on to people in public spaces? Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have the distinct pleasure of working with Jess Lance, our Director of Special Projects, and the Parks Department on the first draft of the People in Public Spaces chapter. So Director Wendy Nielsen helped us draft this and talk through some of the issues and challenges here. The guiding goal of the chapter is to create a sustainable, high-quality, innovative park system, reflecting the unique identity of Providence. And a few takeaways here that I have from strategies that are included within the objectives. Even taking a quick step back to just the narrative section, as someone who was raised in the city in the 90s and 2000s, I think the investments in our park system over the last decade, are pretty transformative. Really have expanded. There's several new parks. There's brownfields that have been converted to parks. There's riverfront parks. There's new neighborhood lots. There's a dramatic expansion in programs, the Eat, Play, Learn programs, city summer meals for kids that are run out of parks within the last decade. There's a lot of investment in stormwater innovation in our parks, in attention to kind of biodiversity and climate resilience in our park system. So just that's kind of the context that we've had a decade of pretty dramatic investment in these parks, and doesn't mean we need to slow down at all, but some of the challenges and opportunities that we tried to tackle in these objectives and strategies are limited resources and limited land, honestly. So we have an objective on kind of programming in our parks, on sustaining, maintaining assets, linking park spaces, increasing accessibility of facilities, stewardship of these resources, community involvement, and community gardening. But yeah, a few of the challenges that came up that we tried to address here are considering how we expand resources, work collaboratively with community partners to maintain our park assets. How we think about, our city is limited in its footprint. There's limited opportunities for green space expansion, but really think about where we prioritize that. So there's a strategy on thinking about neighborhoods that might have limited tree canopy, that might have limited access to green space, and trying to focus any new park space, especially with that in mind. And of course, climate is a big one. So there's a few strategies sprinkled around here that are trying to look at including climate resilient design in our park system, and really thinking of our parks as an opportunity for carbon sinks and cooling areas. But the city is, of course, growing and changing, so that means that we need to think about our programming in flexible ways. We need to respond to changes in the populations in different neighborhoods and what exists in those spaces. One last point that I'll make that I think is that's incorporated here is around accessibility. So we kind of update some of the language around accessibility standards in the design of spaces. So there's the new ProWAG standards, which are kind of coming from ADA, that are around public realm, and how we make that accessible to people of different physical abilities. And so we've included a strategy there, and we're trying to think about how our park system is accessible to everyone of all ages. I think I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah, I think some of the statistics that are laid out in the introduction. The amount of like $49 million were invested in public park improvement projects, 277 major projects completed, and 90 additional major projects in the pipeline. I mean, that's obviously it's a priority, and I've seen like over the past 10 years, the amount of work and time and kudos to the parks department. They're doing a great job. And I think you're right. You just need to keep on the same trajectory while updating to incorporate with the sustainability goals that we need to have interwoven into all of the chapters of this. Anyone else? Okay, great. Before we move on to the last chapter of economic development, there is a sign-up sheet going around somewhere. We want to make sure that everyone who wants to talk, you keep it coming around and ends up back on that front table so that we can start calling people when we're ready for public comment. And then we'll go right into the economic development portion. Wow. We have a celebrity guest.
Oh, you do kind of. Thank you. Joe Mulligan with the Planning and Development Group. Just wanted to briefly talk about the economic development chapter of this comprehensive plan. I've mentioned in many of our public forums how fortuitously coincidental it is and beneficial for us to undertake this exercise right now, as most cities across America are trying to determine what their future will be like in this current kind of fundamental change in the way that people work in many ways, particularly in a city like Providence that has historically had a robust downtown central business district serving some of the conventional industries you typically see: finance, insurance, real estate, and other types of businesses. As that practice of work is changing with remote work and people being able to live in places remote, very, very far remote from where maybe their central office is kind of located on paper, if you will. So this has been a real challenge for cities, and I think what we have benefited with in Providence is that we are a capital city, that we are the largest city in the state, and that benefits us in many ways. We are in one way sunsetting kind of legacy industries as we transition to a new economy, and maybe thinking about those legacy industries in a different way. There may be not heavy manufacturing or other types of industrial activities. They may also be, white collar jobs that are transitioning in different ways. We have benefited historically by being able to transition much of our commercial office space over the last several decades to residential. So we have a strong residential downtown district. And what we need to do is continue to work to find a path to encourage attract new green and blue technologies to supplant some of these diminishing industries that we have. Continue to work to diversify our economy in new and different ways and avail ourselves with technology that is at the advent of what we're seeing today in the global economy. We continue to work to develop and educate our workforce, which is probably one of the more important aspects of a robust economic development strategy. To retain and support our existing businesses is a key indicator, as well as attract new, clean, again, blue and green technologies, which we're seeing some indication of that, particularly on the waterfront with the advent or the continuation of wind power, which we've been able to apportion a large share of. In greater coordination with our institutions, we have many institutes of higher education, and I think they had a realization that they need to lean into the local economy more with their knowledge transfers and technology transfers. And we're seeing good development cluster the road, particularly down in the 195 district with the life science and biotech industry, largely supported by Brown University, and also into our healthcare sector, which is a large employer and an important component of our province's economy. Notwithstanding the desire to work more with them in terms of their institutional master planning to see how they arrange themselves physically on the landscape, which has warranted a great deal of improvement, I think, in our perspective. And we look forward to doing that with those institutions as we move forward with the administration. And also, we've seen a change in affordability as well as income strata. Those are global forces, but certainly things that are hyper-local in terms of the cost of living. We're benefited by being able to have a robust affordable housing fund that has been able to support gap financing for a lot of new residential construction locally here. And I think the most robust sector that we have seen is the affordable housing sector right now, with multiple units being planned or developed or under construction, as we try to continue to provide affordability for residents so that people can, move to Providence or continue to live in Providence and have a healthy live-work balance. Also, as we see this transition, we have to really rethink the way that we organize our downtown. I think this traditional central business district as a destination for the workforce is changing, and that will have intended impacts on the way we organize our transportation networks, from a hub and spoke model to one that might have more connectivity throughout the neighborhoods and to adjoining municipalities. And also how we encourage and continue to encourage our arts and culture sector, as well as tourism. We find that people are coming to the cities, maybe not as much for traditional work hours, but it coming into the evening hours and for events and activities and for our cuisine. And as a result, we're doing some multiple planning initiatives now to kind of lean into our nighttime economy and think of the city as much as a desirable destination for entertainment, as well as a kind of a compulsory destination for location of a job or the work. So overall, we're encouraged that we have a very low unemployment rate. We benefit from our central role as the capital city here in Rhode Island, and I think we continue to see attention because of the quality of life that can be provided here in Providence. Its beauty, its arts, its culture, its attractions, all point to a positive indicators for Providence, as long as we can, from the public sector, keep along and continue to nurture that by reducing barriers for business startups and business expansion, smooth out our permitting processes so that we eliminate barriers for new development and new construction and new residential development, as well as business development throughout the city, and provide those amenities and benefits to living or visiting Providence that have made this such a desirable destination, one of the great cities in America over its history.
Thank you, sir. A lot of these things were notes that I had that you just brought up. One of the staggering statistics that I don't know that I was acutely aware of was the demographic changes as far as household income, that the under 45,000 and over 99,000 income brackets grew, whereas the middle of that 45, 46 to 98 declined, which is kind of an odd thing. That middle bracket is in decline. I completely agree about continuing to diversify the tax base, continuing to evolve the port use. And the biggest thing I think we have to try and figure out somehow, in some way, and I don't know how to make an economic development policy around it, is the brain drain. All of these students, these higher learning institutions that we have that are a model, and people come here from throughout the country and around the world to study here, and then they don't stay. And we need to find a way to keep them interested in staying in Providence. And I think we're well on our way on a lot of the other aspects. Trying to simplify planning, business planning, development projects, things like that. That's all good. But how I agree, continuing to work with our institutions, specifically around retention of talent is something that we have to really prioritize.
And that's not only good for Providence, it's good for the institution.
Absolutely.
That they're alumni
Yes.
connections and their pathways for opportunities for recent graduates. And I think there is a great realization that those institutions can do more. And, if we can provide more of the context for people to desire to stay, that will benefit all bodies involved.
Completely agree. Commissioners, anything else for Director Mulligan? Nope. No. Thank you.
Great.
So did you have a summarization of any sort you wanted?
I just wanted to plug our next steps before public comment, which is just again, our neighborhood feedback events. We anticipate in May, we'll be presenting the next 4 chapters, followed by the public hearing, City Plan Commission. And then after that, the process transitions to the city council, but plan.providenceri.gov is the destination for all informational drafts so far, including logistics for these events. But excited to hear public comment. Thanks everyone for coming tonight.
Thank you, Tim. Again, I can't emphasize enough how great a job you guys are doing. This is a Herculean effort, and I really appreciate the time and the effort that's put into it. So we're going to take a 5-minute break before we go on to public comment, but I do want to reemphasize a few things. First is, the next step to speak or learn more about any of the chapters. Tonight, we're here for these 4. So we're gonna talk about, take public comment on these 4 chapters that we spoke about tonight. If you wanted to speak about the built environment, there's going to be other meetings where we can do that. Obviously, those listening sessions at the libraries coming up.
Land use.
Oh, sorry, land use. Yes, sorry, built environment was tonight. Excuse me. Thank you, Bob. If you the land use chapter, you can talk about either at one of these listening sessions coming up at the public libraries, or again, we're having a full vetting of the entire comprehensive plan at a later CPC meeting, again, where we'll listen to comment on the entire comprehensive plan as drafted. We're focusing on these 4 tonight. And then obviously there will be multiple city council hearings about it afterwards. So we're gonna come back in 5 minutes. We're gonna take a short restroom break. It's 6:01. We'll come back at 6:08, and then we'll start public comment at that time.
Okay, let's go.
All right, we're gonna call this meeting of the City Plan Commission back to order. Please find your seats. And get ready. I do have a sign-in sheet. And we'll start with the people who are here with us in the room today. We will have just like the previous sessions, we're gonna have a 2-minute time limit on comments. For this, we have a lot of people joining us online as well who've already started raising their hands. So we're gonna limit comments to 2 minutes. As we have previously. Again, there are many other ways. There's email ability to Tim has listed the website numerous times. We can do that again at the end to make sure if there's any comment that he wanted to get to the people drafting this. Outside of those hearings next week. I know I'm looking forward to seeing a couple of them. Unfortunately, I'll be out of town for the last week, the week of the 4th. But I do plan to get to a couple next week because this is an important process. So we're going to start, well, and we'll start appropriately with Sharon Steele. Thank you for bringing up you made a great comment last week and Bob and I, or last month when Bob and I spoke about it, and it is important to have time allocated for these meetings. This is a special meeting.
Thank you.
You weren't wrong, and we are here today to hear public comment. So you're the first member of the public.
Thank you so much. So, I'm gonna sound a bit like a broken record because I'm gonna talk about process. Sharon Steele, President of the Doherty District Association. So, the last time we were together when we discussed the comp plan, I asked if there could be a 2-week time period between when the planning department drops the drafts so that then the neighborhoods can convene meetings so that we can, after we've read them, we can talk amongst ourselves and make recommendations. Things like, what's there, what's missing, what do we agree with, what don't we agree with, what changes should be considered, what needs to stay, what needs to go. That has to happen for every single draft chapter. So 3 drafts dropped on the 18th, which was Thursday. I didn't know they dropped until I was told they dropped by a council person. So therefore, I sent it to my board yesterday, which was the 22nd. I haven't even been able to read those drafts. So the way these things are being set up does not make for bottom-up participation. We still have 4 drafts to go. What I heard tonight is they're not even going to be introduced until May, yet the meetings at the libraries are going to start next week. So, in my humble opinion, there needs to be an effort, 1 draft at a time, to gather people who have anything that they want to say on that 1 draft. So, I am hopeful that we can get the process right so we can maximize the good that needs to come out of this. Thank you.
Thank you. The next individual in the audience is Leslie Myers.
And thank you, Leslie Myers. This side. I'm addressing economic development and unintended consequences of the last 10 years in Providence. Thank you all. I enthusiastically support the plan in general. But within my hopes for Providence, there's a little yes, but voice in my head, and listening to it more carefully turned out to be the gap between the blue sky thinking of the plan and enacting the plan.
Previous comprehensive plan of 2014 expired as we do tonight, to prioritize walkable, vibrant neighborhoods where zoning failed to implement plans intentions. We will be critical of the handoff to zoning by its body being not wrote. Specifically, I'm going to talk about C2 zoning and mixed use. Mixed use development was the heyday was in the early aughts, and it was most successful in exurban planning and not so successful as individual buildings within cities. Lately and sadly, the use of mixed use for new buildings isolated within existing C2 neighborhood spines has forced the hand of Providence Planning to approve multi-story housing, which is good, very good, above empty commercial floors, bad, very bad. They remain empty for years. Look at the jewelry district. First floor retail for rent signs stalk empty sidewalks in the same first floor windows for years. Conversely, a survey of healthy commercial with industry reveals small, locally owned business occupying small footprint affordable storefronts. We need to take a closer look at the outmoded planning tool. This is not 2004, it's not even 2014, this is 2024, and time to think about mixed use planning again. I know you as urban planners can get ahead of the curve, and you've been doing that with your work so far, so please get even more aspirational and even farther ahead. Providence Planning is famous for prioritizing artists, creative living spaces. Is that my bell?
Yes.
I'll be very quick, I'm sorry. Why not expand that to everybody who works, maybe stay-at-home moms, who are working, and instead of having one huge shell on the first floor that is empty, start renting to smaller businesses and the people living above, not just creatives, but everybody. My other point was that many cities have time limits on zoning, such as shovels in the ground in 12 months after you buy property. Why not require developers to have tenants within 12 months?
Thank you. Next up is Lorenzo Pella. Apicella. Thank you. Sorry about that. And then on deck is Jennifer Lorelli.
Yes.
Lorenzo Apicella, I'm the architectural representative for the Jewelry District Association. And to Sharon's point, I didn't really have a chance to look at what we've seen tonight before tonight, but the first item up was building design. It's working.
Yes.
It was building design, and that's the area I take particular interest in. And the thing that concerns me about all the good words in that was it felt like there's a presumption always towards fitting in, and that fitting in is absolutely understandable in preservation areas. But I would make the point that even that is questionable. With new uses going into preservation areas, it seems to me that the last thing we want to do is to pretend to be one thing when we are in fact another. And I think that's very important with new building, the new development to be authentic, the way those preservation areas buildings were authentic at their time. In Europe, as you can probably tell, that's where I hail from. Preservation is handled in a way which says, by all means, preserve what's good, but what's failed, let's not build it again, pretend it's one thing when it's not, when it's another. So what I would like to see within the building design part of this plan is wording which also encourages innovation outside those preservation areas. One sees all the time all sorts of places which, frankly, even in their time, were mediocre buildings and have become even more so over time. I think the wording needs to encourage being challenged by innovation. That's what will make new buildings potential catalysts in very dormant parts of the city. My worry is that anyone coming along with a good idea, wanting that good idea, feels the need to simply mirror the lowest common denominator in some of those non-preservation areas. So my case is, let's find words in the building design part of this which actually welcomes innovation and challenges the status quo. doesn't rule them out before anybody's had a chance to speak for them. Finally, and say, we have all sorts of in the jury district. It's called the innovation district, and my worry is when I see new projects going up in the district, nearly done, developers twist themselves in knots, trying to echo what's there. Echoing what's there would be such an eclectic twisting of knots that in actual fact, all that happens is it's the lowest common denominator rather than the highest. So innovation, please, be welcomed in building design.
Thank you very much. Christopher, hope you were taking notes on that one. Hope you were taking notes on that one. Jennifer, you're up, and Justin Baptista is on deck.
Jennifer O'Reilly. I note that all of your sections have clearly stated goals, clearly stated objectives, but I see no language about evaluation. I note that the objectives are very general. They're promote, preserve, very, very general language. I see no specifics. And again, I'm concerned about no language about evaluation, no report backs in 3, 5, 7 years, or a final report in 10 years. Maybe, reporting administratively takes a long time. I understand that, but it seems very general. And I wonder when evaluation is not included in the plan, I think the rush or the concern to get things done in a specific way sometimes is loosened. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Justin, you're up. And Tim Moore, you're on deck.
Hello, Dr. Baptista, 34 Hilltop Avenue, Providence. And in the built environment chapter under new development and physical character, it says encourage new developments to be compatible with Providence traditional character. And I'm wondering how physical character is defined and connected with new development, because my concern is of a portion of designs that fail to complement the community they are part of. Buildings meant to be a part of the neighborhood, not separate or centered. Their heights should reflect that by matching heights of surrounding buildings, because more height means more occupants means more traffic. By bike or more vehicle, it doesn't matter. Surrounding streets, local businesses would be adversely affected. I'm worried about this in areas like Fox Point, because if one branch is compromised, the whole system fails. And a neighborhood is built on that system. It should be changed without proper consideration.
Thank you very much. All right, thank you. Thank you, Justin. Tim Moore and Aaron Hill on deck.
Several items which I will go over quickly. First is the first map that was shown on the screen this evening of the kind of urban enhancement areas. It's hard to see on that map, but if you look at the one I've seen, North Main Street below College Hill, where the Roger Williams National Park is shown as enhanced residential development. It's impossible to develop the national park. The buildings on the opposite side of the street are part of the historic College Hill District, which abuts it. And that blue strip should be removed. Because there is no room to build high-rise apartment buildings, condos along North Main Street next to the National Park. Second item is following up on the previous comments. The built environment section PE2 says, as the previous plan, the current plan says, buildings should be compatible with the neighborhood, height, scale, and mass. Unfortunately, all too often, the CPC and the planning staff have completely ignored this requirement. The building previously mentioned that is being proposed at Wickenden and Brook Street is completely out of character with the adjoining buildings. The buildings that are being torn down are two-story buildings. We're putting up a 4 or 5-story building. It is completely out of character with the neighborhood. And this has happened on other buildings as well. And now there's going to be a building in the Mount Hope district where somebody is proposing a completely out of scale building. So we would hope that both the CPC and the planning staff would take much more concern about the language in the top plan. Third item quickly is the Port of Providence is really a wasted asset. Pat Connolly, 20 years ago, had a vision of making the Port of Providence a place that people would actually want to go to, as opposed to being a source of pollution which harms the neighborhoods in South Providence, Washington Park, and North Elmwood. These neighborhoods have extremely high rates of asthma, and the recent fire of the Sims Metal caused a lot of people in the neighborhood to have asthma attacks. The city really needs to be much more creative, much more focused on figuring out how to turn the Port of Providence into an asset that the people of Providence can use, and which does not cause physical harm to the people in the immediate neighborhoods.
That we're gonna have to ask you to stop. You're well over your time limit, sir. I appreciate that. Thank you. Next up is Aaron Hill, and then on deck we have Cameron Lafreniere.
Hi, my name is Aaron Hill. I'm a resident of Washington Park and a member of the Providence Urban Network. I want to just start real quick by thanking the commission and the planning department for so many chances for interaction, including this special session and getting to talk with planners at my neighborhood association meeting and at board meetings. I just want to hit on a couple points throughout these chapters that some I like and some I would like to see some small modifications for. I'm very happy with Objective 2, Strategy C of the Built Environment chapter, encouraging development on vacant lots and parking fields throughout our city. I think that's exactly the type of infill development we need to see, just like from the 220 Blackstone development last week's CPC meeting. As far as Objective 2, Strategy D of the Built Environment chapter, I have some concerns how we're only using language of encouraging mixed-use development. But in strategy B of that same objective, we're saying that we will ensure neighborhood character through restrictions on development. And I think I would like to see some rebalancing of the language there to ensure that we can continue to develop affordable housing in our city. As far as objective 5 of the built environment chapter, it just starts to discuss the city's leadership on design and building codes in our state. And I would love to see more specifics on how we can lower housing construction costs there, perhaps through innovations like single stair or housing sprinkler reform. Touching very briefly on some of the other draft chapters that have come up tonight, I would like to see a larger focus on the place of mixed-use dense development in our city and non-car transportation options in achieving the goals and objectives of specifically the sustainability chapter and the economic development chapter. When it comes to sustainability, objective 1 on stormwater, I think should put forward front and center the necessity for dense development and reducing parking fields as a way to get rid of impermeable surfaces and stop sprawl in our city. And then with objectives 2 and 5, we have to directly strategize on how we can leverage dense, tall, green development in our city as ways to meet our goals on climate protection and sustainability, because we simply cannot reach them in any other way. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Up next is Cameron, and on deck is Alana Deludy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for your time. Appreciate seeing you all here again today. My name is Cameron Lafreniere. I live at 115 Ave, the east side of Providence. I'm also part of the Providence Service Network. I'd like to thank the planning department and the commission for seeing through these drafts. I think they're incredibly well intentioned and well thought out. It's very clear that the people here are invested in this plan and invested in each component and how they interplay with each other. It seems that some other people here tonight haven't been as focused on the actual agenda items, which do not include land use. You had your time to process. That was last time. I understand we need to get this out to everyone, but I would like people to come to more of these meetings. These are the actual public meetings where each individual will have their say and their sentiments heard. So as it pertains to resiliency, I think it's very smart for us to be considering adjacent bike lanes to neighborhood parks. It's incredibly important, as you can see right now on South Water Street, as well as along Manton, which for equity reasons is very important. I think the chair of the commission brought up an excellent point regarding the heat map and essentially the heat issue around our areas of our city that are most impacted by climate change. It's incredibly important that we allow those spaces to have safe infrastructure. They see the highest levels. For example, along Broad Street on Pomona Ave, we see some of the highest levels of car crashes with pedestrians and cyclists. These issues have not been remedied with DPW nor with the mayor. He has not yet made recommendations or a declaration that he will improve these areas, but it's incredibly important that we attack this from a resiliency perspective when it comes to building more trees along areas where you could have narrower roadways. I think that's something that we really have to be talking about, as well as just like to point out that really, we're going to have to build. Like everyone that thinks they don't want, a 4-story building in an area that already has 4-story buildings, but maybe the building next to you is 2 stories. Like, sorry, we're built up. It's not all about you. Like, let's keep it realistic here that this is the city for everyone. We have to make considerations that include everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Alana, you're up, and Marjorie Winter is on deck.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Alana Deludy. I am a lifelong Rhode Islander, South Providence resident, and a real estate investor in Providence as well. And I'm saying this also as a real estate investor. It is weird to hear so many people speaking so negatively about new housing being built. Like, housing is an emergency in Providence. We don't need to rehash that. But I wanted to say, as someone with like an obvious financial interest in housing, that a lot of the sustainability goals being discussed, like transit, bike lanes, density, parks, accessibility, all of those things, I think we hear about as in opposition to the financial interests of many types of people, such as myself. But I actually don't think those things are in opposition at all. I grew up in Cranston, and basically anybody that was smart at Cranston West has left the state. It is very difficult for a state like Rhode Island to retain the best and brightest when we cannot compete with places like New York and Boston that offer not just good jobs, but, and as we know, good jobs kind of follow from a lot of this type of development, like transit density, the ability to attract things like conferences and major events hinge on that kind of infrastructure existing in our state. And I think as a landlord, I benefit as well from this type of development. I primarily rent to people who, like myself, are non-drivers or driver light, let's say. And the only time I ever had a tenant pay rent late was when they had a car repair. And that really changed my perspective. And I think a lot of these things that reduce a huge economic burden for citizens, reduce brain drain and attract the kinds of people that might be leaving Rhode Island for, you know, sunnier pastures in Boston and New York, make our city a lot nicer and more affordable for everyone. And I think we actually, as a few other people have mentioned, we need kind of more specific language around this transit and density issue as well in Providence. And that's all I have to say, so thank you.
Thank you. Marjorie, you're up. Chris Tompkins is on deck.
Margaret Winter, and I live in the Jewelry District. And on the map that is now in the works that we're talking about, the new project with what I really don't know why you're considering the Jewelry District to be part of downtown. I've been living in the Jewelry District for 15 years. I work and live in a building that house many artists and designers. Many of them have left and will come, but the district still maintains an art and very interesting. I just really feel that the Jewelry District is not part of downtown, and it doesn't belong on the map as part of downtown.
Okay, thank you very much. Chris Tompkins, and on deck is Gail Gifford.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Chris Tompkins, Joe's excellent comments, inspired me to make a few remarks. I think the comprehensive plan needs to highlight the critical nature of the Providence train station to the future of the city's economy. If one goes to the Providence train station at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, it's packed. If you go to the Providence train station on Saturday morning, it's packed. Providence is not going to attract large corporations anymore. You have to enable people who can work 3 days a week somewhere else to easily access those larger economic bases. Takes 45 minutes to get to Boston, takes 3 hours to get to New York. Everybody knows that. The comprehensive plan needs to acknowledge the importance of the train station to the future success of Providence. With respect to sustainability and density, I think we need to have an accounting of surface parking lots in the city of Providence. It's all about sustainability, heat, and there are a lot of nice words, but I can't think of anything more specific and concrete than to at least acknowledge and identify where those surface parking lots are, and perhaps they can be developed in the next 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Sounds like a good project for you. Gail Gifford is up. Grant Bulgarian on deck.
Good afternoon or evening. I'm Gail Gifford. I live in the Summit neighborhood in Providence. So I have 3 quick points. One is I recently attended the community meeting that council members Anthony and Anderbar held on flooding and stormwater management in their districts on the east side. Harrowing stories of flooding, just streets that are rivers. In the last year's July, and of course, it's not going to get any better. One of the things that doesn't seem really well accounted for in the plan is perhaps to consider, and I don't even know if this is possible, but zoning for stormwater management that clears out. The more we build, the more density, the more impermeable surfaces, including rooftops. And I just believe that that's not integrated enough, and we're not future thinking enough about that. The second is on design. Recently traveled this summer across country and back. And I think our design review is failing dramatically and looking at the big box new buildings that are being built everywhere. We saw them in Moscow, Idaho, in Moab, Utah, in Des Moines, Iowa, you name it, they were everywhere. Which just the loss of a sense of place, the integration. And there is the ability to develop innovative, modern, and fit in. 18 Congress Street in Portsmouth, New Hampshire is a shining example of that, just gorgeous building, won design awards. The third is the environmental advantage of historic preservation, which needs to be considered. Recently went to National Trust online conference on climate and historic preservation, and the upfront carbon costs that are so much more than operating carbon costs. And we need to think about really how to encourage retrofitting old buildings and reusing old buildings as an essential part of the sustainability plan.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we're gonna get to Grant. Christian Roseland is on deck. Before you start, Grant, a note to our followers on the interwebs, joining us from home or anywhere, really remotely, with this meeting. If you'd like to speak after we get through everyone here in this room, please raise your virtual hand in the middle bottom portion of your screen, or press *9 if you're calling in. We want to make sure we have everyone in order and where they need to go. All right, Grant, go right ahead, sir.
Thank you. Grant Bulgarian, 20 Exeter Street in Providence. I want to echo what Sharon stated at the top of this public comment, that public input. That is, for such an important document, once a decade, 2 minutes is not going to cover it. What's that, 30 seconds of section? Come on, give me a break. I want to encourage the City Plan Commission to have separate meetings on separate sections. I can understand you don't want to have, a dozen, 9 or 12 separate meetings. You can bundle 2 or 3, but then allow folks to speak to them, both in general, overall, and specific. Some of us have been following and paying attention to those land use and zoning for a long time. We don't measure it in years, we measure it in decades. We have perspective, historical perspective. We've been talking about environment, resiliency, transportation. I want to offer one suggestion to the members of the City Plan Commission and the staff of the City of Providence. All of a sudden, within the last quarter year, we had this little incident called the Washington Bridge, which died. And we're talking about building the Washington Bridge for how much money? Millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars. And what will that gain? 1 lane in each direction for a fraction of a mile. Give me a break. I would suggest that the city, CPC, staff, City of Providence administration, call for an EIS
to look at the alternative. Instead of spending this amount of money, these my 2 minutes are up already and barely talked on one topic. Not acceptable.
To finish up this statement,
I'm going to, I'm trying my best. That we call for an EIS, environmental impact statement, on comparing building a highway bridge to gain 1 lane in each direction for a fraction of a mile. Or resurrecting and instituting rail. We talk about Boston, we talk about New York. If Boston had a Newport 28 miles away, they'd be looking yesterday at how to connect the two by rail. Providence and Newport are what, 28 miles apart from each other? And how much would it take to connect the two by rail? Because so much of it already exists. Now is the time to look at that as an alternative. So I call for an EIS, environmental impact statement. I also call for another EIS, an economic impact statement. What would the difference be between doing bridge or doing rail? And I also call for an LIS, a labor impact statement. What would the labor impact be? Not only the building and construction, but also afterwards. Running and functioning. So that's number 1. And I'll just touch on for 10 seconds apiece. I have thoughts on sustainability, the environment, recycling. Providence's recycling rate is pathetic. What are we going to do about it? What can we do about it? I have specific thoughts, but I don't have time to mention them tonight. The education, why are their education results not where it should be, where I think it used to be when I was a kid growing up in Providence, K-12. So we need to look at this comprehensive plan, couple of sections at a time, to give folks an opportunity to
Mr. Kilgarian,
get into this in depth.
I implore you to write more
Done.
comments down and share them with planning staff.
I don't write down, we have a conversation, we have dialogue. That's what this is supposed to be all about.
Christian Roseland and Marissa Brown, you're on back.
Those are great comments, by the way, from my own. They can do something with that. It's needs and encourages in the city.
Thank you so much, members of the planning commission and planning department. Really appreciate the work that you've done. My name is Christian Roseland. I live on 842 Hope Street. I'm the Ward 3 coordinator for the Providence Urbanist Network. I will say that I have not had a chance to read everything in the chapters that dropped, but I am encouraged by what I have read. Particularly objective BE2, I want to support strongly a lot of the things that are in there. Including the enabling more mixed use. Its time is not over, particularly along the important commercial corridors in the city. And having those sort of commercial spaces enable people to engage in the sort of creative outputs and the creative pursuits that many people in Providence, people come to Providence for, and that, you know, are one of the defining characteristics of the city. I also appreciate the emphasis on reduction in surface parking lots. I think that one's really important. I think that has implications for the sustainability chapter as well. I greatly appreciate in objective 2 of the sustainability chapter, the inclusion of reducing vehicle miles traveled. That one, look, for the climate, that's your most important one. And I hope that these weren't ranked in order of importance, because if not, that one should be on top. But I do really appreciate the earlier gentleman's comment about the taking some sort of accounting of surface parking lots. I think a good way to start here is if we had an inventory of the amount of area in the city that is dedicated to surface parking, because this is a problem from sustainability, from a permeability standpoint, as well as being a huge untapped land resource. In fact, I would encourage language that would ban the building of new surface parking lots in the city. I think that we've got plenty of surface parking lots. If people want to build parking structures, they need to build up. This is a city. I am concerned a little bit about the restrictions on height and massing. I think we need to be careful to make sure that those aren't so restrictive that we are unable to meet some of our goals here, such as building the housing that we need to confront the climate crisis and the housing crisis. Thank you for this. I just want to note that we've heard a lot from those who got theirs and would like to shut others out, but that's not a path to success for the city. We need to build for everyone, and I encourage you to, I'm encouraged by the work you've done and would like you to see you continue along that path. Thank you so much for your.
Thank you. Marissa Brown, you're up.
I'm online. Beautiful.
Hi, thanks. I'm Marissa Brown. I'm the Executive Director of Providence Preservation Society, and I live in Potts Point. Two things. I think I wanted to urge consideration of some form of design review. And the reason I'd like to do that is I think it's really important as these projects come up that there be a real role for community voice. Not just because it's sort of a democratic process, but I think just as importantly because there may be significant knowledge gaps that might not be included unless there's an opportunity for community voice. What I mean is that planning, like preservation, is not always a very diverse field. And so the notion that planning staff might have the role of design review and that there not be a way for community members to give input on hyper-local design culture ways, I think would really be a missed opportunity. Providence is a global and really cosmopolitan city. And I think that I would hope that we can find ways to create pathways for community voice, because I think we really want our landscapes to reflect the diversity of the city. So I'm a little bit worried that without a design review process, we're really obviating that community voice and ability to shape the city. I also wanted to agree with what Nicole Verity said about incentives for carbon neutrality. I would go further and really also widen that to discuss adaptive reuse. I think it's not just the building's carbon output once it's constructed that we need to be measuring, but it's also demolition and new construction. There's a huge carbon cost to demolition and new construction. And like other cities, I think we want to be looking at that process holistically. Thanks.
Thank you very much. All right, so we're going to move online now. We have a handful of people already with their hands raised. Again, if you're joining us online, please raise your virtual hand or press *9 if you're calling in. First person, please introduce yourself.
We have Kelly Murphy. You can go ahead and unmute.
Oh, hi. Hey, thanks for letting me speak. My name is Kelly Murphy. I've been a Providence resident since 1995, and I've lived in actually 3 different neighborhoods throughout my time there. And I'm currently a 12-year resident in Mount Hope. I'm a history fanatic, and I love researching this beautiful small city. So thank you so much for your time and efforts in revamping the city plan to strive to make this an even more culturally rich city. My main concern that I want to talk about, or my question, is strictly in developing density within the Providence residential neighborhoods. I think we all can agree that high density residential and commercial zoning is a must in our ever-growing downtown and commercial areas. But why is city planning and zoning committees going against their own guidelines by allowing R4 zoning in well-established R2 and R3 zones? And I am aware that R2 will be upzoned to R3 under the new comprehensive plan, but R4 is an incredibly nebulous definition. And in fact, many of my neighbors have been requesting tangible numbers in regards to density and dwelling units in regards to the R4 rating. Does the committee have any thoughts about trying to zone properly to ensure housing for those who would like to settle in a more permanent manner in our neighborhoods, rather than maximized small footprint, maximum environmental damaging apartment buildings? High density R4 apartment buildings may not be the best within the outlying neighborhoods. I think it imperative for the committees to adhere to their own zoning propositions. And thanks again for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Claudia Wack.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Claudia Wack. I live in the Summit neighborhood. thank you very much to the City Plan Commission and all of the planning staff for your work on this. It's very much appreciated. If I am going to pull out just one topic to comment on in my 2 minutes, I would say that I appreciated the recognition in the built environment chapter that historic preservation obligations come with significant cost burdens. And I know that historic preservation has an important role to play in Providence, but I would encourage you to have that chapter grapple even more deeply and more concretely, particularly because there's some reference in the land use chapter to potentially expanding historic zones, about how the city could potentially offset historic preservation with more concrete financial incentives, because I think the unfortunate reality is that sometimes properties that are quote unquote being preserved are sometimes in actuality not being maintained because property owners can't afford to meet the standards that are being imposed. Window replacement, I know if you're in a non-historic property, maybe it's $200 a window to replace, that can jump to $600 a window if you're meeting certain historic preservation standards. So I think if this is something that the city wants to continue to emphasize, grappling with how to square that circle is something I would encourage you to keep digging in on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Mel Rainsberger.
Hi there. My name is Mel Rainsberger. I live on the east side of Providence, where I've lived for 14 years. I'm a member of PUN. I also run the Providence 48-Hour Film Project, which is a local film festival. And in full disclosure, my rent is $1,950 a month without utilities. And I've lived in Rhode Island in general for 24 years. I want to say thank you for giving us all time to speak. It's very hard to make time, but this is the consistency of these meetings and the tone you set are really appreciated. It's good that everybody throughout Providence has a chance to come together at these things. I also want to say that please be more specific on transit. I have owned a car for 3 out of 24 years of living in Rhode Island. I have been carless for about 14 now, and I've seen the transit get immeasurably worse. It needs to be specific. It needs to be actionable. I run a film festival where we're screening at the Avon. I can not get home at night via the bus, and I live 2 miles away. And the #1 bus line is maybe one of the best in the city. And if that's the best this city can do, is to not get somebody home after 9:30 p.m., that's not a good city. That leads to a lot of the other problems that other parts of the plan are trying to address. And it's a major factor of why people don't stick around. If we say, here's your diploma, go get a car after spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to be educated, they're just going to leave. So thank you so much. That's my time, and we'll move on to the next person.
Thank you.
Okay, Lily Bogosian. Go ahead, Lily.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm the president of the Fox Point Neighborhood Association, and I appreciate your presentation tonight. I am wondering, in terms of the Fox Point area, how the decision to turn Wickenden Street into a priority density zone will impact both from a sustainability viewpoint, from an economic viewpoint, and environmentally, how the decision to upzone that very small street, in essence, with small businesses into a high density zone. I'm not sure how the commission intends to pull that off without jeopardizing those 3 issues that you've discussed tonight. I find that it's going to be a decision that will have ramifications for the entire community and not necessarily thoughtful ones. So that is essentially my point in terms of Fox Point. I also want to reiterate what Sharon Steele and others have said about process and how the process of making these, what are enormous decisions with regard to a street that is economically very active and environmentally sound and economically vital, how you intend to make those changes without really the input of the community. I mean, we have at least a petition with at least 800 people who are opposed to just one building alone being transformed into that kind of a zone. So I thank you for your time, and I hope you'll consider rezoning Wickend into a smaller density. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, Catherine Prevost is next.
Hi, my name is Catherine Prevost. I'm actually a resident of Cranston who visits Providence regularly. I wanted to speak to the people in public spaces stuff that you were looking at. Specifically, I wanted to ask for possibly some special attention to how to ensure that the combination of public parks and other public spaces with roadways works, and how we can make our roads safer as the density of pedestrians and cyclists and other vulnerable road users increases in comparison to cars. I know that has been a concern of a lot of people around the South Water Street bike lane stuff, moving back towards 2 lanes maybe with the mayor's proposal, and just in general the question of how to ensure that roads are safe for moving goods and people in a variety of ways without endangering people enjoying public spaces. Thanks very much for your time, and that's all I have.
Thank you.
Okay, we have someone named Daniel. Could you identify yourself and then go ahead
and spell your last name, please?
Hi, good evening. My name is Daniel Morris, Morris. I live in Elmhurst, along Eaton Street. I want to comment on the economic development draft that was released today. And I would like to thank members of the committee for making some very true observations about our city's current economic situation, namely that we have a disappearing middle class. As the draft notes, we have an increasing number of more wealthier residents making 6 figures and above, an increasing number of residents making less than $45,000 a year, but those between are slowly declining. And the reason for this decline, I think as the draft hints at, is that Providence economy is in some sections doing very well. We have a new health and life sciences center that'll be opening up downtown fairly soon. Brown, all the colleges are doing well. But those middle income jobs where people might work at smaller businesses, work in manufacturing, work in, say, the service sector, are not to be found. I think we all know that every restaurant, every hotel, so on, needs staff because the cost of housing is not suitable to those income ranges. I would like to thank the committee for noticing this. It is very difficult to make people aware that the city is not affordable for a large portion of its own population. I hope this committee will continue to work with smaller businesses and other job providers in trying to fill their employment gaps or worker gaps and staffing shortages. If Providence is to grow at all, it needs workers, and those workers need a place to live. So we should upzone more of the city to construct more housing. Thank you.
Okay, and Liza Birkin.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me all okay?
Yes, we can.
Great.
Hello, my name is Liza Birkin. I'm the lead organizer of the Providence Streets Coalition, but I'm just calling tonight as a resident and someone who's actually in the process, home stretch, I hope, of buying a home in the Elmwood historic neighborhood. I absolutely love my neighborhood. It is very mixed income, very mixed race, very mixed class. It is like a bunch of large historic mansions, basically, but across the street, just literally across the street from my home, we have an apartment building, a low-slung apartment building that takes up an entire city block of lower income residents, and it is fine. It is so fine and good, and there's no problem with having a few apartments. There's another apartment building down the street from me where an old church is getting converted into 15 units. That is also fine. There is a halfway house down the street. There's a new shelter for women and girls. And there are some very wealthy families as well. And it's very mixed income. And I think that more of Providence should look this way. I love my neighborhood and think that more Providence neighborhoods could benefit from that kind of diversity of housing options and choices and people. I also just want to talk about sustainability here for a second, and the idea that single family or lower density homes are more sustainable than multi-family higher density is laughable and really, really absurd. If you just, anyone can Google a map of carbon footprint by capita and look in the US, and you'll see that the lowest carbon footprint are the highest density places, you know, Manhattan being the top. And it's not difficult to understand why. It's because of walkability and having more housing units be heated and cooled by the same system rather than single family detached homes. So of course multifamily and higher density is more sustainable. That is a fact. That is not debatable. So thank you to the committee and for everyone who is afraid of upzoning. I really encourage you to take a look outside of Providence, and it's going to be okay. It's really going to be fine.
Okay. Thank you very much.
That's it.
Looks like everyone else from the virtual world has commented. So at this point, Tip, do you want to say anything to wrap it up? Just thank you again. Yeah, I know that you've taken notes on all of this, and we'll continue to iterate the process and the documents, and I will see you next week, hopefully twice, and I guess we'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn. Second?
I'll second.
Wonderful. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming for this special meeting.